And the other thing that's very interesting about those statistics is that only 5% of people actually die at home in Botswana officially.
What's the number?
5%.
But unofficially?
I don't know what officially is, because the other thing that there is, which is actually going to shock you even more, is that only 80% of deaths are registered in Botswana.
Why?
Yeah.
This is Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. We enthuse, we energize, we inspire, and we empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes in BW and beyond. Hello, Dumela. Welcome to another episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. Always a pleasure, as excited as ever, to bring yet another entrepreneur to come and share with you. We're going to talk about a very unusual subject. We're going to talk about the subject of death, the subject of morbidity, especially here in Botswana. It's a subject that causes a bit of concern. And Dr. Xavier Mmono, as a practitioner of many, many decades, is well positioned to discuss this subject with you and share with you. And it's not his first time. It's not his first rodeo, as it were. He's been here before, about 18 months, 2 years ago, and we shared on obstetrics,
Obstetrics and gynecology.
and gynecology as well. Forgive me for that slip. And let me start off by a shameless plug. My book, $350. It's available from Exclusive Books. It's also available from first floor Mogobe Plaza here on our building. Please feel free to just pop in and get your copy. And again, let me remind you to do the honorable thing, which is to strike the subscribe button. Don't forget the notification bell, as well as the like button. Please keep us afloat by doing that. And thank you for also getting us to 21,000 plus viewers, subscribers. And we need more, because 66% of you are not, according to YouTube, are not pressing the subscribe button. So please, that 60%, if you're among the 66%, please, I plead with you, strike that subscribe button. In exchange, I'll keep bringing vibrant, energetic, entertaining, and highly educational content, and I'll make sure I bring the entrepreneurs who will just speak to that and empower you as well. Time for me to introduce, or rather to turn to my guest, Dr. Xavier Mmono. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's good to be here again.
Okay.
This time, probably talking about something that is quite taboo.
Yes.
But not in a morbid way. We're not going to talk about morbidity, but not in a morbid way.
Yeah.
And hopefully demystify death. And go on to basically talk about how we know it affects all of us, but how we can find out what kills us, how we record death statistics.
But there's probably one person who doesn't know who you are. For the benefit of that person, would you mind introducing yourself?
I apologize. I always forget to introduce myself. I assume everyone knows who I am.
Yeah.
My name is Dr. Xavier Mmono. I am a native of Botswana. Lived in England for quite some time, working as a consultant, obstetrician, and gynecologist. Now doubling up in aesthetics, which is now the major part of what we do, and laser surgery. And I'm now based in Gaborone, Botswana, at the moment.
What triggered your interest in the subject? What made you want to talk about this or investigate this issue?
Right. Couple of reasons. I also have a law degree in legal aspects of medical practice. One of the most controversial things when I was actually doing my LLM was to look at the Coroner's Act, which at the time had not been revised in England, which at that time had not been revised for about 100 years. It's the 1987 Coroner's Act, which was actually enforced at the time. It was actually reviewed again and actually sort of revamped in 1988. But
it goes back to 1897.
It goes to about to 1897, the original Coroner's Act, the first Coroner's Act. Or the first coroner in England was actually the office was established formally in 1846, which is 10 years after the Death and Birth Registrar Act. of 1936, and basically that's how basically the coroner developed to be what he is in England today, and that's probably something that we lack here, and that's one part of why I'm interested in a coroner's act and investigating death. The other thing is since I
The
came,
only corona some of us are familiar with is the coronavirus.
yes, indeed.
So tell us what corona is.
What a coroner is. So let me just give you a brief history. Most countries have an officer called a coroner. In England, in the 2009 Act, which basically sort of amended the 1988 Act, he's actually been mandated, and he has a duty to investigate death. They investigate death that is supposed to be unnatural, that is sudden, that is violent, that occurs in police cells or in prisons. And that's basically that brief generally. The original coroner actually goes back 800 years to 1196, I think it was, or 1194, when the coroner then was actually a Queen's officer, or the King's officer, who would investigate death to some extent, but it's a very narrow thing in terms of what he did. Broadly, he actually was also looking at taxation, and he basically looked at measures of death that the king can benefit from.
What does taxation and death have in common?
Because at the time he wasn't actually meant. People pay death tax. I mean, one of the very interesting thing is that you probably heard of someone called William the Conqueror.
I've heard of that.
When William the Conqueror basically sort of like conquered England, and the English basically got the land back eventually. If you were anything what's called a Norman, was basically the people who basically fought for him, the villagers to murder these people and kill them. And one of the things that the king actually said, well, look, the war is over, but what happens is if anybody kills a Norman, then you impose a heavy fine on them, on the village, because this is the villagers who kill them. And then the king actually used to make money out of that, but that was actually to stop people killing each other. And the way the Coroners Act actually developed is probably where we are in Botswana at the moment, which is that when the Coroner's Office was actually established in 1887, as in the Act was actually established. Sorry, the Coroner's Office was actually a bit earlier than that. There was a lot of people who were dying, and unnecessarily or in very suspicious ways.
This is in the 1700s.
In the 1800s.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because poisons like cyanide and red poison were all over people's houses. So you could literally give someone a bottle of water with red poison, and then they'll bleed to death internally, and then they'll be buried the next day because they don't go to mortuaries and things. They weren't investigated. And homicide was actually sort of like not investigated the same way that it is now in the UK. And I say that we are at the stage of 1887 in Botswana because most of our deaths are not investigated at all. They do get reported, and I'd say without doubt that one of the easiest ways to kill somebody in Botswana is to kill them, lock them in a house, to get them decomposed, and they'll be buried that afternoon when they get discovered. There's very little forensic investigation that goes through it.
Do you have any numbers there?
And I don't have any statistics, but it's. I mean, I can can give you recent cases, which I'm not, because obviously I'm not doing a podcast. But there's been like 3-4 in the last couple of weeks where people were found decomposed in the house and they were literally buried the next day or that same afternoon. And I'm sure the cause of death.
Yeah, in Botswana.
Yes, and I'm sure the cause of death is going to be recorded as unknown.
Unknown.
And I remember before we went on air, we were discussing this, that the commonest cause of death in Botswana is unknown, and that's 25% of all cases that get reported. 1 in 4 are actually unknown. And that is actually on the official statistics. It's not me making it up. That's actually sort of the 2021.
If I go to Statistics Botswana, I might find that.
Yes, the recent figures are from 2021, but it was published in November 2024. So it's actually a very recent, or the most recent statistics that we have. It is actually quite an interesting read, and the way that we record death, I think you can also ask yourself the accuracy of those statistics, because they work with the figures they're given. It doesn't mean that
entrepreneurs who watch this show be interested in issues around death?
Basically because
I'm asking a question just to provoke a
yes,
conversation.
and I think I've something that I've given a thought, even before I came here, and one of the things that we forget is that these young people mainly, who are the future of the country, these are the people who basically provide for the old in when they're going to the pension age, are being killed at a very young age. Some of them drop dead, and a lot of them get killed in car accidents. And if you don't have a car, you're unlikely to die from a car accident. So because the more you're successful you are, the more likely you are. I mean, look at the musicians in South Africa. I mean, most musicians in South Africa don't survive until they're 40, 50 because they get killed in accidents or in gunfights or whatever. The other thing that's very interesting in terms of...
Some of them fall sick and just
Yes,
die very quickly.
I think there's a lot of them. Yes, the other thing that's very interesting about Botswana as well is that the register of births will accept things like unknown as a cause of death. They'll accept short illness as a cause of death. Part of it is because the families themselves don't want to know why people died. Sometimes you hear stuff on social media saying so and so has died at Marina, and then you say, but literally you start thinking, how did that actually happen?
Well, we've had incidents of people driving themselves to hospital not feeling well, and then
Yes.
that's all. That's the last we see of them.
Yes, but and I know a couple of people, and not just Marina. I mean, the last person I knew, I think, was Sidilecha. A guy went in and he'd been in GPH for a while, got sent home, then went to Sidilecha for a procedure and never came back. I mean, his car was still in the car park when when his funeral was being held. But it's how then that kind of death is investigated. And I'm going to refer back to the UK again when you try and develop this. And the laws that we still have to govern death in Botswana are from the 1962. They're actually the laws that were in the colonial era. So we still are living under those. I mean, when do you exhume a body, for example, in Botswana? And what do you do if someone dies at home in Botswana? What do you do if you're in an institution with 6 beds in Botswana and you have a death? There are rules about that, and they're legal rules, and they're all from a law from 1962. So at the end of the day, I think you've got to ask yourself basically how you investigate death, and I think that's probably going to be another subject so later on, and we should get into it.
Yes.
At depth.
But before you get into that, I'm just curious why the majority of families are not interested in finding out and investigating the deaths of their loved ones.
Right.
Why is it people just accept, no, he just dropped,
I think
he or she just dropped?
I think there's several reasons. The first reason is basically that we feel that somebody has suffered enough, and doing a post-mortem, say, it's going to be traumatic to them. I mean, it's a misnomer to say, well, you're dead.
Yeah,
there's no trauma involved. Yes, it's not going to be. And in fact, to be honest with you, even coroner's postmortems are done in a very sensitive way. Even any postmortem that's done is done in a very sensitive way. It's done in a way that basically, if you saw the body afterwards and you didn't know, you should not be able to tell this person has had postmortem. To respect the fact that family are going to want to see that person afterwards.
Because here they seem to cut everything.
I don't think they do. I don't think they do. I've only been to one post-mortem in Botswana, and it was my cousin who died in a car accident, and that post-mortem was mandatory. He had to have one before he got buried. But then we also
for insurance purposes.
But at the time as well, it's a really interesting thing because everybody wanted him to be buried on a Thursday, and postmortems are done on Thursday, so you can bury him on Thursday. So as soon as it was done, Friday was the funeral. And that's the other side of your answer to your question, is the fact that in Botswana we want to bury our dead very quickly.
Is it because it's expensive to keep people in a mortuary?
Well, I don't think it's the expense of the mortuary alone. It's also the expense of Merapelo and I think
people, they call it the vigil.
Yes, and I think also, even if you didn't have Merapelo, we had this controversy when my dad died, and I was very much against Merapelo starting the next day because we had 10 days. But my sister basically who obviously co-owned the the program.
You were overruled.
Who was very religious. Yeah, I was overruled by everybody else. So I started on Thursday, and I don't pray. I'm an atheist, so I basically decided that I wasn't going to go to any of the Mirapelo except to say hello to people. But that's by the by. And I think the other thing that there is people want to get a death certificate as soon as possible for insurance reasons. So if someone dies today, tomorrow morning they'll be at the hospital or wherever they die, or wherever they are, to actually sort of get a death certificate done, so that they can actually get on with the process.
And that is wrong because?
Well, that is wrong because basically it then hinders the investigative process, and it's for a doctor who is actually under pressure. He is gonna write unknown, because it's acceptable to write unknown, and he doesn't know generally. Sometimes it's not genuine. I touched on my uncle's death, who was had cancer, and probably respiratory disease as well. And when he died, the doctor just wrote unknown in his death certificate. I've actually sort of like sent a note to the minister about it. Say it can't be right. And I think he read it and blocked me off his WhatsApp thing. So that's by the by. It's another interesting story.
No, but still, you're talking about an uncle dying.
Yeah.
For an unknown cause.
Even though it was known.
Even though it was known.
Yes.
Explain that.
Well, basically, my uncle, the guy, he died at home, which is in Hebron. They took him to Hebron Clinic, where the nurse obviously knew he was dead, but the family was not so sure. So he said, don't offload him in the car, go to Good Hope Hospital where there's a doctor to certify him. So I happened to be in Good Hope at the time, actually, and by the time they got to the hospital, the doctor had seen him, certified him dead, which is one part of it. Because when you say someone is dead and you write in the notes, you confirm that death has occurred. You don't actually write the cause of death. Then the family have to come back the next day, and then a form is filled by the ward clerk, and that form is the one that informs the authorities that there's been a death and the cause of death. And from that form, the doctor will then write unknown, because yet
the family knows what he has been suffering from.
Yes, but the irony of it is family are actually happy to get this death certificate with unknown, so they can have a funeral on Saturday. And that is part of our problem. I mean, if you died in England, and I'm going to refer this because basically that's where there's a well-developed coroner system. If you wrote unknown in a form, you automatically trigger the coroner system, because the coroner needs to know why a death has occurred.
So if it's unknown, the funeral is stopped by operation of law in England.
Yes.
Whereas in Botswana?
In Botswana, unknown means nothing. You can bury on Saturday. I could have poisoned you, or I could have stabbed you at the back. And just because when the guy examines you, when you got brought in dead, it's called BID. He looks at the front mainly. He doesn't examine the whole body. He's just turning you over to look at what's happening in the back. I could have poisoned you, and that's what I'm saying. Homicide occurs, I'm sure, a lot more commonly than we do. And the people who are mandated to investigate unnatural death in Botswana is actually the police. And what experience do they have?
They don't have forensic specialists.
They don't, and they do. I have lately been involved in the construction of the lab, the forensic lab in Gaborone. And it's a grand building. I mean, the building is amazing. It really is. And it's been there for 10 years.
Where is it?
But it's in Village. But it's not functioning. And it's not functioning because funds ran out to equip it. It's got loads of good equipment. I mean, it's got, about 25... The mortuary is amazing, if you've ever been to a mortuary. I mean, it's got like 25 fridges. It's got fridges for big people, small people. It's like, everything's been thought out there. It's got an amphitheater where you can watch postmortems from. But it's never been used. Whereas if a mortuary in Marina breaks down now, you get sent to Bule or to Linz, and the government pays for it, when they've got a facility that actually can work by switching a button on. But anyway,
what does it take to fix that facility?
It's taking where we are at the moment. I think one of the problem was actually that the electrical fittings had not been completed. So the government has suddenly found 42 million pula to actually fund the completion of the electrical bits.
Yeah, because...
But then in that time, in the 10 years, this part of the ceiling has fallen off. So,
So this 2 million has been awaited for 10 years?
42 million.
42
It's
million.
42 million, yeah.
But it's been awaited,
For 10 years. I mean, there may be other problem, but it's an admin
and
block.
the places continue to deteriorate.
Because it's not maintained. But there's an admin block, there's a forensic lab block, and there's also the pathology bit of it. And not only that, going back to the question of decomposed bodies, it has a decomposition room where basically these liquid people can be taken to that room to actually await forensic investigation rather than bury them the same day. Those facilities actually exist. Whether there's anybody who's going to be brave enough, because it takes a lot of courage and bravery to actually be
Does
able.
it take political will as well?
Yeah, is death really that important to us anymore?
It should
that
be.
It should be. And in fact, going back to the coroner, one of his roles is to investigate death for the good of society. Okay, so if you get killed by a car outside because people drive drunk, and that's where, going back to your question again about entrepreneurship and what kills young people. I mean, we are not killed by diabetes. We are not killed by hypertension. They're killed by two things mainly. One of them is car accidents. The other one is suicide. And by going to a doctor every 2 years to be investigated and your blood tests run, and we say, well, we're fine, we basically are doing good for health services, we're not helping those people. Because are we looking at their mental health? What's killing people at that age? Why do people kill themselves at the age of 24 and 29? And that's one thing that basically we don't talk about as well. And it's common. These are young people, and going forward, these are people who are going to run the country when we're not there anymore.
The future of the country.
The future of the country. I mean, between the age of 24 and 34, basically, is when you've got the highest unnatural deaths that you get. 50% of people who die at that age don't actually have anything.
So this 1 out of 4, this 25%.
They are known people.
Yeah, they are known causes.
Yes.
It's not just a suicide. It's not just
No.
accidents.
No.
It's just people dropping off.
Yes, it's unknown.
Yeah.
It's unknown. A car accident is a car accident.
Yeah.
And that's something also, if you look at the statistics on the whole, add into that, you'll find that half the people who die in Botswana die in what's called a health facility, which 50%, only 50%, or just over 50%. The other 48% die elsewhere, on the road, at home, in small clinics somewhere, because that's not considered to be the major health facility, so they're taken out of that. The example of my uncle, who basically, I think he died at home. He didn't actually die in the clinic, but he would actually feature as someone who died in the clinic, because that's where we are sent to Good Hope from. And the other thing that's very interesting about those statistics is that only 5% of people actually die at home in Botswana officially.
What's the number?
5%.
But unofficially?
I don't know what officially is, because the other thing that there is, which is actually going to shock you even more, is that only 80% of deaths are registered in Botswana.
Why?
Yeah. It used to be like 60%, and we're very proud that we've gone up to 80% because we're campaigning that they should be. Because not everybody dies in a facility where you can go and register people.
So let's paint the bigger picture here. Our deaths are out of control. Our deaths are incorrectly regulated. What's the first thing that needs to be done? Supposing our diagnosis process, is it correct? And if it's not correct, what needs to be done there?
Right. Okay. I think there's a couple of things that probably you should clear up when it's a diagnosis. To diagnose death is not that difficult. A medical practitioner is a person that normally is given the responsibility, say, to give you a death, to certify you dead. If you happen in Nojani or whatever, there is no doctor there. So how do you certify death? The nurse can't do it officially. You may need to get buried because there's no mortuary facilities. So what you do in that case, I think you report to an authority. It could be a policeman, it could be a chief, and then they take those forms down. They've got a reporting system that goes there, and not everybody dies the sort of death that we think of, you and I here.
Yes.
That you get sick, you go to the hospital, a doctor says, oh no, he's dead, form is written, death certificate is issued, and then you go through insurance things, you get buried. Okay, so I think that counts for the one in 5 people who basically don't appear in the statistics as they are.
20%.
20%, and also for the people who die in hospital, the accuracy of the recording is actually not that great. I mean, you may die in a hospital, it may say in a notes what you had, and I'll give you an example in a second. And unless that information is captured on the form, the reporting form, by the clerk, who probably is just an ordinary person who's not trained either to record death or to even look at the ICD codes. One of the things that kills a lot of people in Botswana is supposed to be essential hypertension. And essential hypertension is just high blood pressure.
Why do you call it essential?
That's what it's called. That it has no other cause. So it's not due to your kidneys. It just happens. It's one of those things that happens. Essential is a medical word rather than
It means what?
It means just no cause for it. It just happens.
Oh, okay.
But
and that is one of the leading causes.
it is one of the leading causes, especially as you get older. But that is actually a comorbidity for most people. It's not the cause of morbidity. Blood pressure itself can cause you to, say, have a stroke. But it's a stroke that kills you. It's not the blood pressure. It's a secondary cause of your death.
Is that what you mean by comorbidity?
It's a comorbidity, yes.
Meaning it's
It means
accompanying something else.
It exists in your body and normally doesn't do any harm. It's an illness you have, but you live with it. And most people with blood pressure, most people with diabetes don't actually know they have it. But I mean, if you look for them, and that's basically where you can say, well, we have to test for these things, because if you control your blood pressure, then you hopefully won't get a stroke in the future, and you won't get heart disease in the future. But on the whole, most people will die from other things. Essential hypertension is something that's recorded in the notes, and the clerk will copy that, and that will show in the statistics that's a common cause of death in Botswana.
Yeah.
But is that actually accurate? Do we need to train our clerks more? Do you need to train our doctors more to actually realize what is a cause of death and what is a mode of death?
The difference?
The difference is that basically a mode of death is like saying you have heart failure. Okay, heart failure doesn't cause your death. Something else gave you heart failure, and something else may kill you, but it leads towards your death. That's a mode of it.
So the underlying cause.
Yes, and the cause of death could be literally a cardiac arrhythmia, which basically your heart basically becomes the electricity to your heart because it becomes deranged. In that case, that is what kills you, and that's what gives you what's called a cardiac arrest. So a cardiac arrest happens to all of us when we die, and recording is the cause of death as well. It doesn't really make sense because you arrest, you're dead. Everybody arrests. But we have it on our death certificate that this person had a cardiac arrest. Yes, this person died. It doesn't mean anything. Statistically, it doesn't mean anything.
So if somebody were to ask what really kills people in Botswana, what would be your answer?
I think I've looked at the statistics, and obviously there are certain things that we all know about, and HIV used to be a big cause of death in Botswana.
It'll come back.
If it comes back, hopefully it's not because of Trump stopping his medication. But if you're on medication and if you take them religiously and you've got a very low CD4 count, there's actually no reason why you should die from HIV anymore. It should be something that you live with.
Notwithstanding Trump's move.
Exactly.
He hasn't affected.
Exactly. But if you're going to be really controversial, Trump will say to you, well, but you're spending money on weapons and there's no war in your country. Why don't you buy ARVs instead? I mean, I'm just being controversial.
Yes.
And I know that it maybe political lines may not be very popular.
So
but
HIV
is one of the biggest causes.
Yeah.
And it's gone down a lot. The other common cause is accidents. Be it road traffic accidents, be it drowning, and whatever. That features a lot on the statistics as well, especially in younger people. And as you get older, then cancers become more common. Of the common cancers that happen in this country, the cervical cancer cancer of the prostate in men, although it's actually not as high as people think it is. It's more common to have cancer of the prostate than to die from cancer of the prostate.
Oh, I see.
If that makes sense. It doesn't kill. People live with it.
It's not supposed to kill you.
You can live with it. It's yes, and
it's controllable.
And yes, and there's a big argument sometimes about having medical screening as to whether it saves lives, and there's a school of thought which will say that if you are screened and they find that you got prostatic cancer, and then you have all the tests, you have all the treatment, and you live for 10 years, and somebody comes back when they haven't been screened and they die of the cancer when they're 90, if they'd known they had cancer at 60, they would have had the psychological effects of having cancer for the 30 years that they knew about it. You know?
So ignorance is bliss.
It can be. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying you should not be screened, folks.
Yeah, I mean, according to that school of thought, ignorance is bliss.
It's a school of thought that's actually not far from my school of thought. But anyway, that's another story. And in women, one of the things that kills them is breast cancer. There is very sadly still a high proportion of women who die from cervical cancer in this country. And cervical cancer should be a non-disease at the moment, for two reasons. One of them is that there's a very good screening test for cervical cancer, and when you're found to have a precancerous stage, it can be treated very effectively without a lot of trauma. And the other thing that's actually sort of changed cervical cancer a lot, which we'll see hopefully in the next generations, is that everybody's offered the NHPV vaccine, and the vaccine should hopefully prevent 80-90% of cervical cancers that we would have had. It still doesn't mean that you can't have screening alongside it, but there could be strategies whereby if you're never found to have HPV after that, you probably don't need to have as intensive screening as you did, and then you save money from that. But the main cost, we're going from
one thing to another, but it's all connected.
I know, totally. But one thing that actually is very interesting about that is that the cost is not the cost of actually giving HPV vaccine. It's not the cost of screening. The main cost is actually treating the disease once it's found and managing it. It's quite expensive to actually treat someone with cancer and to prevent them getting cancer.
So, are you saying the treatment is worse than the cure?
No,
the cure is worse than the...
No, I'm saying that
the disease.
Even if we can prevent the disease, and in this case, I'm actually talking about cervical cancer specifically.
Cervical cancer.
Because yes, it is a cancer that lends itself to many things that you want to know about cancer. Okay, it's caused by a virus. It's sexually transmitted. It's on the whole, 95% of them are, 5% are not, and it has a precancerous stage which is very lengthy. So even if you screen every year, if you screen every 3 years, you're more likely to still pick the precancer. The people who end up with cancer, most of them have had no screening. They probably have screening when they had children like 40 years ago, and after that they basically don't bother. And it's a shame to see someone with stage 4 disease of a cancer that's actually imminently very curable and preventable. You know,
just because they didn't go for screening.
Just because they don't go for screening. And that is one cancer. And I said this when I wrote to the minister about the 2-year screening thing. That kind of cancer, basically, it rings bells with me and say, let's do it. You know, slightly different when you come to mammograms and breast cancer. It's not so easy because in breast cancer you're looking for a cancer. You're not looking for a precancer.
Yeah.
So even if you find it, some people have found a lump before they have mammograms. Some people are found to have a lump, which is not actually cancerous. Then they have to go through the process to actually investigate that lump, which is not without risk. So you know. It's a balancing act as to when you start screening and what you get out of it as well.
So then, of course, we go to accidents and we have your
suicide.
Sadly, so how prevalent are those compared to other countries where you've practiced?
I think suicide is. I mean, in terms of accidents, Botswana is way ahead of everybody else. When I first went to England in 1988 or 1981, I think it was actually 1981. Yeah. People were doing what we do in Botswana, which is basically I go to a bar. It's called a pub in England. I get drunk and then I kill myself on the way home. We are still doing that. And the people who go to bars are usually young people, they're people with brains, they're people with money. And we're losing those people.
So we're not organized in terms of ensuring that we have a designated driver, and things like that.
But that does not come from the 2-year health checks. It comes from education. We need to educate our people that we don't drink and drive. If you're driving, you don't drink. If you're drunk, you don't drive. There may be in Canada they have a system where you can drive yourself to the pub, and then you can phone a guy. The two guys come along, and one of them, they follow each other. So they follow you to your house. The other one drives your car and drops you home. It's like a taxi, but
you pay those people.
Yeah, you pay them. Yes. It's like a taxi service, but instead of actually getting a taxi there and taxi back, or you're coming from work and you have a drink, you drove yourself there. When you can't drive, then you phone them up and they pick you up and take you home.
I wonder whether that would work in Botswana.
It may do. That's an idea for you.
Yeah. Clear this one for me, Doc. You see people smoking Hubblies. You go to a place like Ayoba, you go to a place like the Pond. Everybody has got a Hubbly.
Right.
And you word in the street is that someone can drop dead from smoking the stuff.
Yes, and there's
tell me more. Is it how serious is the Hubbly?
There's a radio advert that's going on about it.
What does it say?
It says exactly what you just said. That don't think that is not without risk. I think the way that they portray their risk is an exaggeration. An exaggeration. I think there's worse things called cigarettes, which basically you don't drop dead, but chronically they affect you a lot more than Hubblies. I think if you analyze what you smoke in a Hubbly, most of it's steam.
Most of it is what?
Steam. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that comes up is actually steam. It's not smoke. And why you should have harmful chemicals in steam, I don't know. I don't enjoy a Hubbly.
So there's a harmful chemical content.
I don't think so. I really don't think so. No one has told me what chemical there is. I mean, I know what kills you in cigarettes. Okay. But it hasn't got nicotine, it hasn't got anything. It's kind of a stimulant. That's why people actually smoke it to socialize, and it's a social thing, especially in the Middle East. People have been smoking Hubblies for ages and ages.
Maybe it's what we put in it.
I don't think a lot is put in here that's actually any different from what you do in the Middle East, because you don't burn the thing. You actually sort of like create a steamy effect as you blow the water through the water.
So is it causing these deaths or not?
I doubt it.
You're skeptical about it.
I doubt if a lot of people who are dropping dead at the moment.
I've had young people, 29, 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened? Oh, he was smoking a lot of Hubblies. So there's no substance to this?
I disagree. I speak as I smoked cigars since I was 18, and I still do. And I know they're harmful. But if you told me that you smoke a Hubbly, I wouldn't necessarily sort of think that this person.
Is it not worth investigating?
It probably is. But what does it take? It doesn't take a lot. We've got a new forensic lab coming up. Let's get the smoke and have a look and see what's in it. Not that particular one they investigated would be the same as the next one. Because it's one of these things that the flavor is banana flavor or mango flavor or whatever flavor they have on it. So you can't investigate every Hubbly. And one of the things that you can do is to license if you really believe that they do. That's what BOMRA is for. BOMRA is
go through BOMRA.
BOMRA hasn't got a big investigative wing. They're very they regulate.
Botswana Medical Regulatory Authority. Yeah.
I don't think they can investigate a lot, but they license. Okay, and the point of a license is twofold. One of them is to control. The other one is to get revenue.
Yeah.
And that's why they got NAS officers.
But before we leave the Hubbly, the steam.
Yeah.
What do you say about the steam there? Is it? I mean, smoke. Why would anyone put steam in their lungs?
Why would they? Because why would someone put cigarette smoke in their lungs? Because it's actually. I mean, I don't smoke for the nicotine. I smoke because I associate smoking with drinking. If I didn't drink, I wouldn't smoke. If I didn't smoke, I wouldn't drink. The two of them go together, and they've done it together since I was 18, and I still do.
I'm not encouraging. Doctors are not supposed to smoke.
I'm not encouraging anybody to do it, but at the end of the day, what I'm saying to you is, you take calculated risk. So the point is, I'm more likely to die in a car accident coming from the bar than ever to die from cigarette smoking or cigar smoking. And if I can eliminate the obvious things, then hopefully I'll live to the day that I get my lung cancer. I may be dead. I might have killed myself at 29 before I get my lung cancer because I'm a smoker. And if we can actually so get rid of those first, the obvious things that we can change, how do we address the fact that young people, male and female, are killing themselves every age? 14-year-olds kill themselves. The statistics of suicide basically start at the age of 14. You go up, and they're still there when you're older, but they're less
it's
common.
mostly the teenage period.
So from that point, but the 24-year-olds to 29 to 34 are not teenagers anymore. These are adults, young adults. They've gone through the puberty stage that you can say they're actually sort of torn by their hormones. There's something else that's going on. Their mental health is not right. And that's one thing that we should look at, because we are actually losing a future. There's no point looking at...
Is it something to do with this attitude of flexing on social media, and the peer pressure is exacerbated by social media?
No, it's possible.
Where you see your age mates seemingly doing well when in fact they are not.
But I don't think this age group it's anything new about them and suicide. Okay, I don't think there's anything new about them and car accidents. And I said it used to happen in England until people changed their attitudes. But suicide in England is still the commonest cause of death in young people. And what is it about that age that makes people basically want to end their lives?
Yeah. And you did mention that in Botswana, people, because of this 1 in 4 dying for unknown reasons. For that reason, it's easy for someone to die from cyanide, from whatever,
totally,
and get away with it. I mean, I wouldn't want a potential murderer to hear you say that. So I wonder whether there's something that can be done about that.
Perhaps you don't talk about it, it happens. And I think it's... I can honestly say to you that if I killed you and then hung you, and I leave you there, you're more likely to and I take your phone and write to your sister and say, I just killed myself. And leave the phone there with you. And then she says, oh no, it just comes. Now the police take that as evidence that you killed yourself. But I could have killed you. You could have been hung when you're already dead. And it's happened before, not here, but I mean, it's happened before.
Yeah, you mean it happens in movies for sure.
Not just in movies, and in real life. And is it Hugh Hackman, the guy who died in New Mexico recently? The 95-year-old had Alzheimer's, 63-year-old wife. They live in the outback in New Mexico. The wife looks after him. She's a big author. And he was found dead in a house with his wife and a dog. And they decomposed. But what does that mean here? It means they're going to be buried that day, which is one thing.
If it were Botswana.
Yes.
But what happened there?
But then what happened there is that they got investigated. And basically they actually managed to have a timeline to when he died, she died. And she died a week before he did in the same house. So she was there decomposing when he was still alive. But this 95-year-old had extreme end-stage Alzheimer's disease. He wasn't aware of anything that was happening. So he had a heart attack and died, possibly because he hasn't eaten anything all week. Yeah, he could have set the house on fire for all we did. And then there would have been another angle to that investigation. And the dog died of starvation too. By the time they discovered. And this woman had a respiratory virus, which is a very rare virus, that you get from rodents and cats and things, apparently. And she died from a chest infection from this thing a week before. That's also very interesting because apparently in his will, he left everything to his wife. so all of a sudden when they opened the will, their wife is dead as well. It's the same day, but But it's just what I'm trying to emphasize here is that unless you investigate these things thoroughly, unless you have a way of actually finding out about these things, we would never have known. And this is a great case study. He's a famous guy that we can talk about. Now, we can't talk about people in Botswana because obviously we all know each other. But this guy is a public figure, and it's all well known, it's all publicized. And the other thing that's interesting is that in America...
Who are you talking about?
Hugh Hefner.
Yeah.
In America, if you die, whether it's Michael Jackson or whatever, your cause of death becomes public knowledge because it's actually sort of a matter of public record. You can't just die and say, oh, no, short illness,
Yeah.
If he's investigated, if he's found out, then it has to be published.
So if a politician is listening to this conversation, seeing all these gaps and weaknesses in the death infrastructure, what should they do? What can they do to correct the situation?
Okay, I think it's... I don't even know which ministry will be most responsible
Ministry
for
of
it.
Health,
Minister of
I
Health
assume.
will be Remudise. Hello, Remudise. And I think when also not just him, but also the way that motion was passed in Parliament unanimously to say, well, we are going to fund health checks every 2 years.
This happened a couple of weeks ago.
That was in November. Yeah, it's one of the first motions they ever passed.
Yeah, it says they're going to fund
health checks for everybody, universal health checks for everybody every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
One, we have no money. Secondly, there is no point looking for diabetes in a 29-year-old when they're going to kill themselves tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So look at what kills people first, and let's record it very accurately. Without accurate statistics, there is no way that we can, one, address the issues that are there, and that we know what's killing us at several points in our lives. And then when you channel the funds to try and improve our healths, we should actually aim it at that. And the second point I was going to make is that if you actually look at every disease, every pandemic that's ever been, it is not putting money into it and putting tablets into it and getting doctors involved with it that actually helped. It is actually a change in social policy mainly that caused that. And
in terms of
you take the example of babies dying from diarrhea at birth. What saves them is actually getting them clean water. It's not the fact that you get dialyzed and she sort of say, well, get your diarrhea and we'll rehydrate you. It's a rehydration that kills them. But if you prevent them getting the diarrhea in the first place by cleaning the water, they'll be fine. The same thing as if you look at the cause of road accidents. I mean, why are people driving when they're drunk? Is because we live too far away? Is it because they've got poor transportation? Is it because we haven't got a good enough taxi service to take us back home when we've been out in the town?
From the point of view of entrepreneurship, it seems to me that we should be thinking about such problems to solve.
Totally.
In terms of becoming innovative,
Totally. It's
so the private sector has a role there.
But it's the same reason that if you arrest all these people called Maparatani, what are they called? They're actually sort of like trying to make a living out of a need in society. And one of the part of that need maybe because I know somebody will pick me up, I will not take my car to the thing, and hopefully I will not get myself killed.
Yeah. Let's zoom out a little bit. I mean, when I was a little boy, it was very rare to hear of the death of a young person.
Yeah.
In fact, I can say in the 70s when I was tiny, or in the 80s when I was growing up, the kind of deaths that we used to attend were largely for people in their 90s and 100s.
Yeah.
Now, 20s, 30s, 40s. What is that? What has been the biggest change? I want us to zoom out and say, what is the biggest contributor that can be looked at a policy level? Because I've heard some people argue that it's diet.
Yeah.
It's what we eat in terms of the kind of drinks we drink, and so on and so forth. What is your take?
Well, that's a saying that you get killed by what you put in your mouth, essentially. It's a lot of these things that you put into your mouth don't kill you immediately, except poison, of course. You build your ill health up. So you are healthy.
It kills you slowly.
It kills you slowly,
but not too slowly.
and well, yes, not too slowly. And the fact is, for a lot of people who go out jogging in the morning, who are normally fit and basically obviously have said, oh, look, I'm going to look after myself, and they're on the road and they drop dead. And the question is, what's killing them? And that's part of the reason why we are here, is to try and say, can we actually do better in finding out what's killing us? Okay, the obvious things that we see, which are car accidents, which are suicide. Yes, we know about them, but what you're talking about is the people who are probably younger than us, who are high flyers, executives, who don't even smoke hardly. They probably sort of drink a lot more than we do, or as much as we do. But are they being killed by alcohol? Probably not. It's alcohol damage, liver damage is a chronic thing, and it kills you gradually. It doesn't just make you drop dead. And we need to investigate these people thoroughly. We need a more forensic way of looking at these deaths. And if we don't, we'll never be able to address them.
But if dietitians tell us it's what we drink and what we eat, processed food,
yes,
and acidic drinks,
yes, but at the moment we are talking about sudden death.
Yeah.
Why the chronic deaths normally hit us at our age, when you're like in your 60s, when you're in your 70s, your late 50s. That's fine. That's what you ate when you're 20s and continue to eat now. Your Coca-Colas and your red meats and whatever you want to say we shouldn't eat. My feeling about diet, justly, which is that my dietitian in me, is that you do everything in moderation. It's okay to have a can of Coke, but it's not okay to have 6 cans of Coke a day. It's an excess. It's okay to have a pound of beer. It's not okay to have 20 pounds of beer a night. That sort of thing. But everything in moderation is probably good for you, and there are things that are good and bad in everything. Even if you say, well, okay, I'm going to take vitamin C, but I'm going to make my own. I'm going to have some lemons and squeeze them every morning and drink that. Then you end up with an ulcer.
Because
the
you take too much of it.
No, because the acid in a lemon is actually going to give you gastritis and gastric disease, ulcer disease, whereas the vitamin C that you get from that is actually not as much as what you get in a tablet. So why don't you just take a tablet of vitamin C? Although it sounds more, it's more healthy to take the natural stuff. Those sort of things that we don't think about. But I mean, that's not what kills you suddenly. I still believe that big category of unknown, that a lot of them are known, because it's just laziness in parts that people actually do that for. But there are truly, genuinely unknown causes of death that are happening now, which is your question that you asked me. What's actually changed? We have become more healthy. We're health conscious. We are running around a lot. Then when you and I were kids as well, we used to play outside all the time.
Yes.
I mean, we didn't have screen time. Hardly any. In fact, there was no TV that I can think of.
No screen to speak of.
So I mean, that itself was actually a source of our health. We're actually keeping health with our, we were probably eating bogobe and nothing else.
Yes.
But that it does no harm. We're staying in the sun, we've got a vitamin D3. So, all those things have changed. But had they changed to actually cause us to die young and suddenly? I don't think so. The obvious things that basically, like dysentery, like corona, say, we know the cause of that, but the treatment is not a tablet. So it's not a doctor. It's actually
the accumulation of taking in processed food and maybe that red meat, despite your exercising, can lead to sudden.
I don't think it leads to sudden death as such. I mean, there are people obviously who have, and I'm going to use the word occult disease. That's disease that basically is not very obvious, but you can trigger it off. An example is, I don't do a lot of exercise, but I suddenly decide that I want to exercise. But I've already got coronary artery disease, which has been okay because I'm not needing a lot of blood to my heart.
And
all of a sudden
all of
a sudden I go for a run, and then I drop dead. Yeah, that's fine. I was killed by that, and it makes sense. But that's when you actually when I was telling before that a cause of death and a mode of death is a different thing.
Two different things.
So the cause of death is probably because I got ischemia, cardiac ischemia, I got an arrhythmia, and that was killed me. But if you look back, you could actually still go back even to my diet as a young adult that I basically was doing. You can go back to my smoking as a young adult, and it kills you when you're in your 50s or 60s.
Let's talk about coroners. What kind of training?
Coroners.
Yeah, coroners. What kind of training do they need, and what systems should be put in place now to make sure we have competent coroners? I don't know if I'm pronouncing them
Coroner.
Coroner.
It comes from the word crown.
Yeah.
Because they were crown officers when they started.
Yeah, and we'll deal with the similarity to corona epidemic and pandemic.
Yeah.
There's some linkages there, but I simply want to know what training is required for these people.
Okay, so they are in different jurisdictions. Are needed different or are placed different types of people. Generally speaking, a coroner will be a solicitor or a barrister or a doctor of 5 years standing, and then you apply for the job just like another job. So you basically you're like in a small court, a coroner's court, and that's where basically you come from. Below that, depending on where you are, you can get people called medical examiners who basically support you from a medical point of view. To actually come to conclusions, but the final decision is made by the coroner as the cause of death is, having listened to all these other people that are around him. Then, in addition to that, you probably would have people who are called coroner's officers, and those are people who basically will first go and look at the death scene, and normally they are ex-policemen on the whole. But it could be a nurse, it could be anybody else who's basically has some training. And the training that you need is basically in forensics, in pathology, and there is a big difference between a doctor pathologist and a doctor forensic pathologist. So if you're a pathologist, it's just a general term. But under that term, you can become a histopathologist, which basically means you just look at microscopic things and stuff. But everybody assumes that a pathologist can actually so go to a death scene and actually determine what happened. But you have to have that training, and that's forensic medicine. And there are courses now in forensic medicine as well. So you can become a forensic scientist, and actually so go through that route. And you may specialize in looking at timing of death. So where the timing of your death is not known, then you can actually sort of like work out from what infects you in that area, as in like insects and stuff, and work out from there for the state of decomposition of the body, and work out that this person was died 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 4 days ago, to give a timeline to when that happened. You can.
So those people need to be trained.
You need to train them, and there are. I mean, it's to become a forensic scientist. There's a lot of courses everywhere. There are people who basically may well be dealing with reconstruction. I mean, you get a decomposed body on the street, you don't know who it is, and you want it to reconstruct. Because one of the things that a coroner does, he needs to know 4 things really. One of them is who you are, and identity is very important. The other thing is when you died, and the other one is where you died, and the 4th one is how you came by your death. And he has
all that gets into the certificate.
He has to determine all that. Yes. And so talking about, so going off tangent a little bit, the coroner system, because you asked me about that, and how it was like almost 400 years that the law never changed. Coroners in England get invited to look at a case. So I'm in a hospital, you come in and you die, and I say, I can't issue that certificate because I'm not quite sure what went on, and it becomes a coroner's case. Okay, so you can
it's called a
coroner's case.
When there's a question mark.
When there's a question mark about your death, so the unknowns.
Yes.
Very basically called the coroner, and the coroner only investigates about 1/3 of the deaths that happen in the UK. Okay, I mean, most of them, the cause becomes obvious with time, or just with a postmortem. Others, you go toxicology studies, and from the blood test, you can tell this person had arsenic poisoning or whatever. Okay, and then he issues the death certificate at that point. He may actually then have something called an inquest, where he brings all these experts who've been investigating the death to actually sort of come and tell what happened and give their evidence.
Is
and then
the magistrate there?
I think here you can appoint a magistrate. Yes, he can appoint a magistrate.
An inquiry, call it an inquest.
An inquest, yes.
Yeah.
So the inquest basically, because the coroner, that's all he does. Here you can appoint a magistrate to become a coroner, a temporary coroner, and he holds an inquest. But he does nothing else. He will not hear any other cases except these kind of cases, and he'll deal with all that. And that's because the numbers are higher than here, which is one thing. And also the depth of investigation is a lot more intense than it is here.
And is it adversarial?
No.
Okay.
No, but also he cannot apportion
It's not one
blame
lawyer against another.
No. It's meant to be a lot of consensus. But also he can't say you're guilty of killing you.
Yeah.
He can just say unlawful killing. And in fact, in most cases, while the coroner is investigating, if he finds something abnormal that he needs the police to get involved in and investigate, they will pause that process, get the police to basically rule out criminal charges, and then go back to do it.
I've done a lot of murder cases over the years, and I've had opportunity to cross-examine a person called a forensic pathologist.
Yes.
And basically, I want to destroy that person on behalf of the accused.
Yeah.
Is that similar to a coroner?
No.
Can you explain?
No, because you're not in a coroner's court. You don't accuse anyone of doing anything else. So you basically want to
because it would be a murder case where I'm defending
right
an alleged murder.
But a murder case is a murder case. You've been murdered, you know? And there will be things like he put a knife into his heart.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your cause of death.
Yeah.
Your death certificate will be very straightforward. It's not. You don't need a coroner to get involved in that, and you will not get an inquest in that case because you've already had a criminal process that actually determines
the role of a forensic pathologist.
The role of forensic pathologist is actually to investigate death in a medical way and give a medical opinion about the cause of death.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And he's a pathologist on the whole, but I think because of lack of personnel here, we use histopathologists. So the person that basically say you take your cancer out and looks at it, oh, you got this kind of cancer under the microscope, is called a histopathologist. But those are people who also do postmortems.
Yes.
You know. But generally speaking, they'll try. A lot of them will shy away from having controversial postmortems that may lead to a case in court. And not everybody can appear in court.
Because it's almost considered routine.
Yes.
In every murder case to bring a pathologist.
Yes, you have to
speak to the cause of death and also to tie it up to. Yeah. They would have an album.
Yes.
With photographs of what happened.
But I think at the end of the day as well, it's what we expect, because then he appears as an expert witness, and I think if you go to become an expert witness, always go with the thought that you are assisting the court. You are not actually trying to get somebody off a charge. You are trying to inform the judge so that when they make a decision,
they are normally called by the state. So
yes,
their inclination is to want a conviction.
Yes, but you can call your own as well.
Yes,
as a defense.
Yes,
but on the whole, I mean, it's especially in civil case in England, they go a lot for common expert witnesses. So if there's a case which is like very straightforward, not murder, then they'll say, well, I agree on this expert witness, and his expert witness basically applies to both of you. And that's all he presents, rather than actually be too controversial about it.
So what is the biggest takeaway that you want the viewer to get from this conversation? What would you say is one or two big takeaways? What are we educating the public about exactly?
Okay, I would say that the biggest takeaway is that we have young people dying for unknown causes. We need to know why before we can try and correct that. We are talking about putting resources into our health and how we can direct the resources to the right place if we don't know what's killing us at different stages in our lives. And should we all basically have a universal system that says, well, every 2 years everybody goes for this, or should we target it and say 85-year-olds die from diabetes, and let's make sure that they don't get diabetes, or 50-year-olds die from hypertension, let's try and find out and screen for hypertension. 29-year-olds die from car accident, there's no point going to see a doctor for that. But it may be a point where you basically see a psychologist, and they've got more access to psychologists at that age, and that's basically where the money is going to be put at. And then that is one thing. And the other thing that I think is actually worth noting is that we really do need to investigate death better than we are doing at the moment. because unless we know the common good that a coroner is there to investigate for, will not happen. We need to know what kills us, and there are a lot of people who've been dying the last 3 months especially, and we need to know why
It's alarming.
we need to know why that they died. I mean, it's some of them
For
are
such a small population.
a small
it's
population,
terrible.
and these are people quite often who are the pillars of society, you know, and just dropping dead, you know. And then on the other hand, I think when we look at what's happening within the health service and want to address it, without a statistic, one of the statistics that's actually very easy to find is maternal mortality. You know, why do women die in childbirth? I was an obstetrician for a very long time. I have never in my life been involved in a maternal death. None of my patients in the hospitals that I worked in, or my own patients, ever died.
Meaning most of it is preventable.
It is, and on the back of these maternal deaths that occur sporadically in the UK, they set up something called the Confidential Inquiry into Maternal Deaths. And that's because the numbers are so low. It actually comes out every 5 years. But there is a forensic, the word forensic is coming back. There's a forensic investigation of why everybody dies. Either
So it's taken seriously.
in pregnancy after pregnancy, yes. And then there's recommendations. There's another book that's probably worth most healthcare givers reading, and it's an article. It was an inquiry by a guy called Lord Donaldson, who was a chief medical officer in the UK. It's from 2000, 25 years old, but it's still very relevant, and it's called An Organization with a Memory. It teaches us to learn from our mistakes. You know, we don't just base yourself, oh, she's dead, that's fine, bury tomorrow, next, okay, you're having a baby, oh, you're dead as well, okay, you know. We haven't learned that death is preventable, should be prevented, and how to prevent it. And the whole thing takes you back to the airline industry. You know, to the airline industry.
Why?
Because if you fly a plane and a wheel falls off and you still land, the investigator is going to say, why did that wheel fall off? And you go right to who put the wheel on, you know, and they're going to learn from it.
So we should take human death as seriously as the airline industry takes
totally
the smallest of accidents.
And you prevent small accidents, you prevent big accidents because they cause each other. You know.
Do you have an explanation as to why this issue has been glossed over?
I think because death generally is a taboo. I don't think you'll find a lot of people talking about death for an hour and a bit.
Because it's taboo.
Yeah, it's something that people don't really talk about a lot. And it's I'll give you another little example, which is basically it's on social media, so I can probably sort of quickly talk about it. The young girl who was like 24 who died carrying quadruplets, and she had a cesarean section in Marina, and both the babies and the mother died.
All four of them?
All five of them.
5 of them, sorry.
Yes, but you know, I actually sort of was quite horrified by the case. One, how could he actually be like that? And I wrote to the family just to say, look, guys, you know what? If you want someone to look at the case, I'll look at it for you. And then more information came up, and I actually sort of like the next day I got a small reply from one of the people who were on the program, and I said, hey, look, I've actually sort of found out a lot more information about this case, but you know, it's if you still want to talk about it, I can help you along, but it was not just as black and white as what
as it seemed
as
originally.
it was on the media, you know, and there's a lot that happened. The one thing that no one has ever answered is, how does a 24-year-old manage to have a quadruplet pregnancy? Somebody somewhere stimulated the ovaries to produce 4 eggs, because humans don't normally produce 4 eggs spontaneously. It's very rare, and there are other reasons why this particular person should not.
You think they took fertility?
Somebody gave a fertility drug which should not have been given, especially without monitoring. And she was Marina, and I'll take my hat off for them. Looking at what happened, they did what
They
they
did their
could
best.
what they could do, and because on the day, whatever advice you give your patient, they have to accept it. You can't force them to. They're adults.
Yeah.
But you look at it, and yesterday I just happened literally to be speaking to her uncle, this person's uncle,
Yes.
over a beer yesterday. And he says, "Motlogolo a mo ne ke mo itlhama lowa, ona na le bana ba lefoko, ka re, there can only be one person like that." And then he says to me, "Hey, can me go negligence."
Negligence. Yes.
Yeah, and I just think
Medical negligence.
And I just thinking, but that is what we believe. A whole.
That's what should have been investigated.
But a whole uncle has not interrogated why his niece died. To actually, she's buried, she's there, and it was a chat in a pub, a chance chat in a pub last night. But you take this as an example, and it's. If you do the investigation properly, you can say to yourself in the future, and the person who gave her fertility treatment, because I'm sure someone did. I don't know, but someone did, because it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And whoever did it is basically smiling somewhere because it's not been taken to book. That is a failure of our health system as well. That if we make mistakes as doctors, not just here, everywhere, we can actually sweep on the carpet, or we can bury our mistakes, as they say.
Yeah, the doctors will bury your mistakes.
It's so easy, but it's easy in every aspect of involving death in this country. Death in this country is something that you can bring about and not necessarily get caught unless you are silly. If you literally want,
That's a terrible thing.
but it is a
Terrible reality to contend with.
It is a terrible reality, and I'm sure people will take me to task about this. But in the day, we don't have, and that's why. And I go back to the Coroner's Act. That's why the Coroner's Office was actually set up in 1887 in England.
Yeah.
Because people were killing each other, and people were getting away with homicide, because the investigation and the recording of death was actually not that accurate.
So Botswana is where England was in 1887.
I think we are. I think we are. That was my conclusion this morning too. And I thought about it and said, that's where we are. We need a system that will actually address a lot of these deficiencies.
How do you personally and your surgery assist in this quagmire? Or how do you think you can become involved, or doctors like you can get your hands dirty in solving this problem?
I have tried, in a way. One of the things is actually I would offer, and I still do, my service pro bono, for people who feel aggrieved about death, and especially medical related death, and want some advice, and actually sort of go through their notes and understand what it is. And sometimes it's no one's fault, and the basis of feel, well,
And you're willing to take it as far as giving evidence?
I am, and I have. I've been to the High Court before, but this is actually so not on a death. But I've done High Court in Botswana before on
an injury situation,
on medical in injury situations. And generally speaking, we don't really charge.
Yeah.
And the lawyers that I've worked with is actually on a win no fee basis. And a lot of them have taken 2-3 years to come to fruition. I mean, we're still not even there yet in the cases that we have going on. So it'd be interesting to see what the outcome of those cases is going to be. But I think also we need to actually really think again about where we are going with provision of our medical services, and not be just too political and a knee-jerk reaction that, okay, you've got board made, you can have a check every year. So I've got no board made, I've got my government will send me every 2 years, without actually knowing what we're going to achieve by doing that. And I think we need to sit down and actually, but this was actually it wasn't the fact that the government is going to do it, it was to ask the government to do it. So the government can still say no. And they can still listen to me and say, please come and talk to us and actually go through this and see how we can best spend our money.
See how
because I think at the moment, yes, it's obvious we don't have drugs, because drugs, everybody's going to have blood pressure tablets, or you got pain, there's no painkillers in hospital, or you got infection, there's no antibiotics. But there's obvious things. But if you're going to throw money at something that essentially is not going to help you,
so-called conspiracy theories like the vaccines we took during COVID may be contributing to all of this.
Yes.
Is this a conspiracy theory or there's some substance to it?
I've actually looked at that from an investigation point of view. I think I was looking at it from the point of view mainly because my own dad had an AstraZeneca vaccine, and 2 weeks after he had
What is that?
the COVID vaccine
Yeah.
made
Which
by
one?
AstraZeneca.
Johnson & Johnson.
No,
Yeah,
AstraZeneca. And 2 weeks after that, he had a massive clot in his lung.
in his
Lung,
yeah.
which nearly killed him. And he was on blood thinners throughout his life
After that.
after that. And that was like 3 years ago. And I still believe that, although he was probably just given up with life, to be honest with you, I still believe that the final cause of his death is probably because he had another clot. And that's basically what embarrassed him, his respiration.
So these vaccines do cause clots.
That's
Or seem to have done in that case.
That's a theory. And there's another thing that's very interesting. There's a lot of people getting strokes in Botswana, young people. And you say to yourself, I don't think it's just here, but we are not investigating that. You know, you hear somebody say a 50-year-old, a 40-year-old had a stroke. Why? You know.
And then there's another certificate saying unknown.
No, they'll say stroke.
They'll say stroke.
Stroke,
okay.
yeah.
Cause
So
of death is a
No,
stroke.
it'd be obvious, yeah. Unless they have a stroke and they just die on the street.
Yeah.
And they just found dead. They say unknown.
So help someone understand how vaccines could have contributed
Well,
to these clots.
I can't, and I don't think anybody can. The thing that's very different about these particular vaccines is that they are called mRNA vaccines, and the difference is they actually get into your cells to produce the antibodies, whereas a lot of them basically used to stimulate your immune system to produce antibodies. This gets into your cells, and they actually sort of literally produce the antibodies from that. And whether this entry of this new type of vaccine is what alters the whole clotting mechanism, the whole health system, or the equilibrium that you have in your body to cause you disease is something that I can't answer. And I think
Why can't you answer?
because I don't know.
Is it hidden information?
Well, it's not hidden. I don't think there's enough information out there. And part of the reason, especially here, is that we don't investigate. And so, I mean, why does it take? I mean, I've not been vaccinated.
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether you and other doctors have taken
Well, I
the
wasn't
vaccine.
vaccinated.
You refused.
I declined.
You declined.
And I declined for a very good reason. I believe that I understood immunology very well, and that a lot of what we have fed was not necessarily as true as it could be. I had a kit which I bought from South Africa, which has my antibodies. So I knew I had an infection, and I actually knew when I had the infection. And I could test myself, and I knew that I had antibodies to protect me. I was looking after people with COVID every day because we're doing lots of IV drugs and stuff. And I knew that my immune system, my antibodies were formed from a whole molecule of all the proteins are available within that virus. If I had a vaccine, it's only one part of the virus that made the vaccine, not the whole genome of it.
Yeah.
The downside is when you went from Delta to Omicron, almost everybody who got a secondary infection were the vaccine people, because Omicron mutated and the antibodies to the part of the virus that they've been immunized again became different. So they did not recognize corona anymore. And fortunately, it didn't make them as ill. And there's a very interesting statement which has actually been circulating a lot, which was made by Kamala Harris, the American presidential candidate. And she said,
last year.
yes, and she said, this is during COVID, not during the thing. And she said, the interesting thing is, everybody who's in our hospitals now has been vaccinated. And the reason why is because unlike me...
What side was she on?
No, she was just saying, basically.
She was just saying...
It was a statement she was making, but she was right. Because these are people, when Omicron came by, the antibodies no longer recognized the coronavirus, so they got infected. Whereas people who had a naturally acquired immunity had multiple types of antibodies to actually protect them.
So you have all these knowledge, you doctors, and yet you didn't warn the public that Tsabango, Wanango.
I don't think so. I think the whole campaign with COVID was run by who basically
World Health
Organization, who basically
Trump has pulled. First move was to pull from World Health Organization.
I honestly would agree with that move. I think they're good on the whole, but with the global pandemics, they have not been that good. And Corona being one of them, and I think basically.
So those who've already taken, sorry to interrupt you, but those who've already taken the vaccine, is there anything they can do to clean themselves up?
I would say speak to your doctor.
That's a good one.
It's a good thing, but generally speaking, I think there is a point whereby you have to ask yourself, suppose you do a long haul flight just now, how can I stop myself? Because if you get another reason to get a clot, like flying from here to New York, then
you are stuck there for 28 hours.
Then is a question that you take something like a junior aspirin to actually thin your blood and actually sort of like help you along.
When you're anticipating a long trip.
Totally. But also there probably are people who have other risk factors like obesity or whatever, or family history of clots, even though they haven't had clots yet. Is it a good move? And I say talk to your doctor, because at the end of the day, aspirin has its side effects. If it was side effects free, I would stand here and said everybody should go on junior aspirin. But because I don't want to be responsible
for getting people in trouble.
I if you ask me, would I take junior aspirin if I had been vaccinated? I probably will. Why? Because my father had a clot. You know, and that's the reason why I'll do it. And should my sister take junior aspirin? Perhaps she should. You know,
because she was having clots.
She's my sister has not had clots, but she's been vaccinated.
So it seems to me that the biggest and obvious side effect is a clot from these. Am I getting it wrong here?
I think you're extrapolating.
Too much. Yeah.
I think it's such a controversial field. That I think if we just basically just say it in general terms, that it could be.
It could be one of them.
That's. Why don't we look at these people who could drop dead because they got clots or strokes, and see how many of them have been vaccinated, how many have not been vaccinated?
Well, I mean, it was mandatory at some point.
No, it was not.
If you're going to travel.
No, it was not.
Yeah, you couldn't travel without COVID.
Really?
Unless you have a smart doctor who can write.
No, nothing to do with smart doctor. But yes,
but for the majority of people.
For the majority of people did, and also people in offices were telling people you can't come into the office unless you're vaccinated. Which was probably bad advice.
Just terrible advice.
It's never been done before that people were actually being forced to take a vaccine to actually be able to come to work.
So if a pandemic were to strike, and there's always talk of a pandemic striking again.
And they happen very frequently, by the way.
The safest thing is to stay away from all this.
From what? Vaccines?
Yes.
I don't know. It depends what. And another thing that's amazing is the coronavirus is the only vaccine that has been. The coronavirus vaccine is the only vaccine that's been produced in record time. You know, it was so quick in its production. And you just ask yourself, how is it that it was just like literally on the, and people are accepting it without.
They call it warped speed.
Yes, but no one was saying, well, this has not been done through all the processes that normally go with vaccine. Everyone was afraid of dying, But if you look at it in real terms, why were people dying from the virus? And is it true that the pandemic actually ended because of the vaccine? It didn't. And I go back to what I said to you before. If you look at history, there has never been an epidemic that's been ended by doctors or a vaccine. It gets ended by social policy. Not isolation in this case, because we tried that as a social policy and it didn't work. Because it's different with animals. You put them in a pan, they don't go anywhere. Even if they become sick, you kill them. You can't do that with humans. And humans actually are now a lot more mobile. There's something called a Spanish flu. Spanish flu. And when the Spanish flu, I think it's 1912 or thereabouts.
1412.
So when the Spanish flu was there, the reason why it actually stayed around Spain is because the Spaniards never went anywhere. You know, nowadays they come to Botswana, they go to South Africa, they go to America, and they take that virus with them. You know.
Doctor, the enemy here is time.
Thank you very much.
We're running out of it. Let me just ask you to conclude your conversation by looking at that camera and inspiring the viewer, leaving them with a few nuggets of wisdom as to what they can take from our conversation. Okay. The final words.
The final words are that yes, we do fear death, but in most cases, if we don't know what kills us, we will never learn for the people who survive what they can prevent. And secondly, I think we are very fearful of postmortems in this country and being investigated after death, but postmortems are done in a very humane way and in a very sensitive way, and basically I think you'll be better off having your next of kin diagnosed properly as to what killed them, and that may actually help you as a person in the future. In terms of our mental health, I think young people should actually open up a lot more than they are. They should probably talk to each other a lot more rather than online. They should talk to each other personally. They should talk to their parents. They should talk to their peers. They should talk to their psychiatrist and psychologist. They can have one. Because suicide is actually one of the biggest causes of death in this country and in other countries. In terms of accidents, we know what we're doing, guys. Let's stop drinking and driving and try and get a designated driver whenever we go out. And with that, I'll probably thank Mr. Mogobe for having me yet again.
I forgot to give you an opportunity to ask me a question. Do you have one?
Yes. What have you taken from this interview?
I've taken a lot. I mean, your analysis on the pandemic and vaccines has been very, very enlightening. I'm going to be more careful next time.
Yes.
Before I get somebody to inject me with something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to vaccines, there are things that you basically, and actually not just vaccines, with anything that you take, tablets and medicines, always weigh the advantages against the disadvantages.
Yes.
And when you for, like in my case, I knew I had corona and I wasn't sick with it. I didn't get COVID, I got corona.
There's a big difference.
And yes, and I knew that I didn't need anything additional to what I've already had, which is a natural dose of antibodies to actually get me any better than what I'll be in the future.
Finally, give them all your contact details and where they can find you.
Yes, we are available on Instagram, and we are available on Facebook on mouthwatering.com. We are also available online if you do Marapula Health at AOL.com, and also if you ring +267 73869 you'll be able to get hold of us.
Physical surgery.
And we are in Marapula on Shuashuane Road, which is behind Choppers.
Thank you very much. It remains for me to thank you, Dr. Xavier Mmono, for giving so generously. Let me remind people, I have a book, $350. It's yours. It's available here at Mogobe Plaza and also at Exclusive Books. Thank you for listening, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Be sure to strike that subscribe button, that notification bell, and give us a like as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned as much as I've learned from this one. It was a great one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.